Rikers Island Unmasked, the shocking truth about America's most notorious jail. Don't miss out on more true crime stories. Hit subscribe, like, share, and join the conversation in the comments. The scene was chaotic. Shouts pierced the air as violence erupted in the intake unit of Rikers Island, sending guards scrambling to maintain control. Inmates had reached their breaking point after months of overcrowding and the suffocating heat of late summer. Fists flew, and bodies collided as a full-scale riot broke out, with terrified officers outnumbered and desperate. Amidst the turmoil, the camera captured a guard discovering a hidden stash of weapons in the midst of the skirmish, a situation that would escalate chaos further. This shocking revelation exposed the depths of corruption and desperation within the facility at a moment when authorities thought they had reached the bottom. How had conditions deteriorated to this level, and what would the fallout be from this explosive event? To understand the riot, we must first explore the dark history of Rikers Island, built in the early 20th century to house offenders awaiting trial. As the facility grew, so did the notoriety associated with it. Reports of violence, overcrowding, and corruption flooded the headlines, painting a picture of a prison system spiraling out of control. This chapter details daily life at Rikers, from the procedures that kept things running to the struggles faced by both inmates and guards. Interviews with former inmates reveal the harsh realities: inadequate health care, food shortages, and the looming presence of gangs. As tensions simmered and warnings of worsening conditions went unheeded, the groundwork for chaos was laid. The chapter ends with an ominous sense of anticipation. Staff received reports of gang meetings within the unit, but could they act in time? As the frustration boiled over, Rikers Island implemented a lockdown to quell the unrest, effectively isolating inmates and intensifying the already high tensions. Officers struggled to maintain order, yet the situation only worsened. Inmates, already agitated and feeling powerless, found themselves at odds with one another as rivalries and alliances formed within the cramped spaces. Through gritty, first-hand interviews, we are immersed in the psychological turmoil faced by inmates subjected to long hours of confinement. The kitchen begins to feel the pressure as food rots in the warehouse, raising questions about nourishment and health. Daily staples grew increasingly scarce, tipping the scales of frustration. The climax of this chapter reveals a shocking incident. An inmate collapses from malnutrition while waiting for medical attention. As guards look on, they feel the weight of impending unrest close in. Would this incident be the match that lit the fuse for the inevitable explosion? The next chapter unfolds against the backdrop of the increase in gang violence within Rikers. Reports reveal that notorious gangs would use intimidation tactics to assert dominance over new arrivals, exposing weaknesses in the prison's security measures. The community within the jail became a deadly microcosm of the outside world, with survival often depending on allegiance. Through powerful reenactments and testimonies from both guards and inmates, we witness the daily struggles for power and safety. Suspicious movements down dark corridors and tense face-offs between rival gang members paint a vivid picture of how vulnerability fueled further conflicts. The chapter ends with a shocking and harrowing moment. A fight breaks out in the yard, and an inmate is seriously injured. As the guards rush to assess the situation, the chaotic environment before them serves as a stark reminder of how quickly peace can dissolve in a place like Rikers. As investigations into the rampant violence began to surface, new evidence pointed to a web of corruption that ensnared officers and inmates alike. This chapter reveals the systemic issues plaguing Rikers, where guards were discovered accepting bribes and turning a blind eye to contraband operations in exchange for favors. Through documented reports and testimonies, the grim reality of Rikers comes into focus. Mentally ill individuals trapped within a brutal system, unable to get help. Interviews with mental health professionals reveal the desperate need for reform, but their concerns often fell on deaf ears. The end of this chapter is laced with anticipation as the quiet aftershocks of a raid reverberate throughout the prison, raising questions about how deeply rooted the corruption goes. Will the authorities act before chaos reigns again? Amidst the uncertainty, the tragic case of Caliph Browder unfolds, a young man who became emblematic of Rikers' failings. Arrested at 16 for allegedly stealing a backpack, Browder endured years of pretrial detention, including time in solitary confinement, rather than plead guilty to a crime he did not commit. As details of his harrowing journey come to light, viewers are left grappling with the human cost of a broken system. Caliph's struggles highlight the treatment of mentally ill individuals within Rikers as public outcry grows. The chapter interweaves personal testimonies from his family and friends, painting a vivid picture of the toll that incarceration exacted on young minds. The chapter concludes with a powerful image of Caliph standing in front of the prison, looking defeated, representing the chilling truth of so many lives affected by institutional failures. Would his story become the rallying cry for change, or merely another name lost in the shadows of the jail? As stories like Caliph's gained attention, advocates began to push for reform both within and outside Rikers. This chapter chronicles the rise of activism in New York City, fueled by public outrage. The narrative exposes how grassroots organizations started to demand reform, focusing on those trapped in the cruel cycle of pretrial detention. Interviews with activists showcase the power of collective voice, advocating for legislative changes to improve living conditions, access to mental health services, and protections for vulnerable populations. Organized protests outside the prison and community dialogues began dominating the landscape, indicating a shift in public perception. Just as hope for reform began to grow, a shocking incident threatened to unravel the movement. Reports of inmates facing retaliation for speaking out against corruption emerged. Would the voices for change be silenced before bringing about the necessary revolution? The backlash against the reform movement intensified as reports of retaliation surfaced. Inmates who dared to speak up found themselves targeted, further intimidating others into silence. The prison became a volatile battleground of fear and desperation, with officers caught between authority and the risk of backlash. Next, we delve into the experiences of inmates who witnessed friends retaliated against for voicing their concerns. The stark contrast between the ideals of justice and the harsh reality behind bars creates a gripping atmosphere, pulling viewers deeper into the emotional struggles faced by many. The chapter ends on a suspenseful note, as a new report emerges detailing a plan to expose further misconduct within the facility. Would this evidence finally galvanize the authorities to act, or was it a risk best left unspoken? As tensions reached a boiling point, Rikers faced mounting scrutiny from city officials and outside authorities. Investigations launched by the Department of Investigation began shedding light on the horrifying conditions that had festered for far too long. The need for change became increasingly urgent. Documentary-style footage reveals the results of these investigations, uncovering shocking grim truths about the actual conditions inside Rikers. Facilities were found to be dangerously overcrowded, with mental health support almost non-existent. However, amidst this momentum for change, the narrative takes a dark turn. Rumors spread of a new lockdown in response to protests, leaving both inmates and advocates anxious about impending consequences. Would reform finally come, or were hopes dashed by the prison's unwillingness to change? As reform advocates continued to pressure city officials, the average citizens began to rally around the cause. In response to the pressure and media scrutiny, a plan to close Rikers Island was put forward. But would the politicians deliver on these promises? In this final chapter, we witness both the passion of the reformists and the refusal of certain factions within the system to budge. The uncertainty of what lay ahead creates a palpable tension, with demonstrations for and against closing the Notorious jail taking center stage in the media. The conclusion leaves viewers with a haunting question. Will the decision to close Rikers become reality, or will it simply become another chapter in the long history of a place marred by human suffering? The stories of those who endured the Notorious jail resonate, challenging society to reflect on justice and accountability. This documentary-style narrative encapsulates the multifaceted issues surrounding Rikers Island while emphasizing the need for systemic reform. The journey through this dark chapter reveals the complexities and struggles faced by many, both inside the walls of the Notorious jail and beyond.